This is Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden.
12 games into his Longhorns regular season, he was only averaging 48 yards per game. Then he hung 162 yards on Georgia, 149 yards against Arizona State, and all of a sudden now he's in the first round. So how do we get there? On tape, you'll see a great athlete, threatens vertically from all alignments, inside, outside, even X receiver. He could snap things out with outbreakers whenever he has off coverage. So I think we have a little development to get him into the real round one conversation, but I do understand the ceiling just based off his athleticism.
5'11", 191 pounds, began his career at Houston before transferring into Texas this year. And one of his best games was against the Longhorns. So I know he was already in the state, but I wouldn't be surprised if Sark on the opposite sideline was like, oh, maybe we should, transfer that guy up a little bit. And whenever a receiver runs in the 4.2s, something electric is going to happen. The buzz is going to build. He ran a 4.29 and a 1.49 10-yard split. That is the 95th and 98th percentiles. We have no jumps, no agilities for him, and probably won't the rest of the way. But again, I think when people see 4.29, they believe he's going to be all go routes all day long. But when in reality, that was just about 26% of his targets this past year, which actually ranks 45th in this entire draft class. To me, he looks his fastest when he is given runways and the free releases on in breakers or outside breaking routes or deep posts or corners, and especially versus zone coverage. It's like turning the corner with a race car, and then he's creating separation and sustaining it even more, and just again moves faster than a bunch of defensive backs there.
Yeah, his speed has felt different than like the Henry Ruggs types and the Jalen Waddle types, who like to me, like I think their game speed is faster. I think Matthew Golden, his change of direction, and to me, like you can see that in the off coverage, the zone coverage that you're talking about. You can feel that, and I think that his route running is something that I'm getting pretty excited about. There's some great pylon routes in the red zone. You already talked about the in breaking stuff. I see it on the out breaking routes against off coverage. He averaged 17 yards per reception. So there are some reps where cover four, just kind of splitting the safety into the deep corner and just absolutely going way down the field on some big post routes. You do see a lot of that. But I do think that you have a player that is also making some acrobatic catches, a couple one-handed grabs, some contortment as well. So it's not like the burner types like the Henry Ruggs where you're like, that is like the fastest wide receiver I've ever seen. It's a little bit different in terms of the athleticism here.
A number of things that you hit on there. Red zone stuff, he was really good. Again, despite being not massive, but 5'11", 191 pounds. I love the physical push off that he had for a touchdown against Michigan. It was, again, inside the 10-yard line on about 3rd and 5. Pushed off and then went to the front pylon, caught that pass. This slant corner, if we want to call it, because the field was so condensed against Oklahoma. While it was a catch out of bounds, he made an awesome route and an awesome catch that he couldn't get a foot in bounds. Again, he's very useful in the red zone with his movement. And that movement to me is going to be taken advantage of by a really good play caller in the NFL. Like, again, despite some people linking him as the wide receiver one in this class, and despite the speed that he absolutely has, I believe that he's going to be best utilized with this pre-snap movement and pre-snap motion that honestly is kind of like Tutu Atwell-esque when I think of it with Sean McVay, where you're going to get him full speed at the snap, either into stacks or on free releases. And so since his momentum and his movement is already near its top gear or close to it, the defensive back is the one who's trying to move in the opposite direction. That's going to give you a massive advantage with a corner running as fast as he can and backpedaling away because he's terrified of getting beat vertically. And so that's what's opening up so many cavities, both on these comeback routes and over the middle field on these dig patterns. And that's where, to me, he's going to help the most at the next level.
Sark literally used the cheat motions that you'll see from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and then obviously the McVay stuff as well. So like they've seen that, and I think that's going to be a very, very big part of his game. In terms of his size, 5'11", 191, he's a little bit bigger than like the Tutu Atwells, like the guys that typically run 4.29. He's got a little bit more density to him there. There are still some reps where the lack of length hurts him, either where the ball's a little bit out of reach or that a defender's going to be playing through him. So I saw some bad reps from him on some slant patterns, some in breaking routes within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, just because you can see some defenders fighting through that. I don't think that his physicality was like overwhelming there. So he's better than a lot of guys in the 4.29 department, but not
Right.
perfect.
He didn't run this fast. He ran a 4.45, but the person whose frame and does that same motion stuff pre-snap who fits in one of those trees is Jaden Reed with the Green Bay Packers. They're almost identical in size, albeit a 10th plus second faster. Matthew Golden is. Yeah, I mean, I even went back and looked at his stuff at Houston because we'll get into it in a moment. The production, I feel like you almost need to look at 2 seasons worth of targets and opportunities in
Yes.
order to get there with the full evaluation with Matthew Golden. And man, in the first 3 games, he couldn't track a pass. He had really bad instincts on the ball. He had a bunch of drops. There were about 7 or 8 plays that I saw him just leave on the field and on the turf. And it made me a bit nervous. Then you turn on the Texas tape and it's almost flipped in the opposite direction. Like there's a whole bunch of great ball tracking. There's a
Mhm.
whole bunch of contested grabs. There's a number of situations where he's working off frame in the opposite direction and reeling those passes in. So I don't know what he did in those 2 years. But over the summer, and sure, there are a couple focus misses here or there, but he really improved in that department. So I am wanting to buy into the hands and the awareness and the ball
Mhm.
tracking they showed at Texas versus Houston because they were almost 2 totally different players that I saw on the field.
Yeah, you make a good point on the sample size. That's the hard part about this profile. Like in terms of like yards per game, 62 yards per game over that entire Texas run. That is the lowest average from a best season since any round one wide receiver since 2020, which was pretty much next to Henry Ruggs. I think the difference between the Jaden Reeds, the Henry Ruggs types that we've been referring to is there were like about half of his snaps like where he's playing like legit X wide receiver facing
Right.
some press man coverage. I didn't think that he was fantastic from that, but a lot of guys are like hidden in the slot, like Jaden Reed, for example. Like they don't even put him in two wide receiver sets. They don't believe that he can do that. You at least see that in glimpses from Matthew Gold. I don't think he's perfect with that, but there was some opportunities for him to at least showcase some of his skill set in those
Yeah, let's get
environments.
into maybe the concerns portion of this
Yeah,
entire thing. Marcus Mosher put this out, and I think it's a great table. And it shows every round one wide receiver's best season at the college level. And you see Matthew Golden all the way at the bottom, where his best statistical season average for per game was 61.7 yards. There's a number of wide receivers on this list that went in round one that people were terrified of their production profile. I mean, Xavier Leggett is an example of that. Uh, Ricky Pearsall was an example of that last year. Those guys are leaps and bounds ahead of Matthew Golden. And you mentioned it, like, thankfully, the Texas Longhorns were able to play 16 games last year because up to 12 games, he didn't have a single 100-yard
yeah.
contest. And then still, through 36 games in his college career, he only had 4 100-yard performances. Now, I get it. When I went back and watched Houston, there were quarterback misses. We definitely talk about that when we look at Quinn Ewers at the same time. And we know that he played with the likes of Gunnar Helm, Jaden Blue, Isaiah Bond. I am not just a production trumps all type of person, but we're also talking about almost an outlier
Yeah.
statistical profile here for a round one wide receiver and maybe the first wide receiver selected in this draft class.
Definitely so, and this is where just NFL loves the speed, and these type of guys tend to go early. So we're recording this before the NFL draft, but if he goes 12th overall to the Cowboys and stuff, like it is outlier bad production for somebody going as high as that. The other thing though is he is a young player, early declared, 21 years old, was playing on a really good Texas team. So all that stuff matters versus some of the other guys that break out really late. But I think he has some things to work on. Another weakness that I saw is he was terrible as a screen blocker and blocking the ground game. That's
I
not the
thought he was terrible
biggest
on
deal.
screens catching the football too, but go
I
ahead.
I noticed that, but that was like interesting to me because a lot of these guys that are going to be in the manufactured touch department, if they can't get on the field in two wide receiver sets because they're so bad at blocking, that is going to take away a little bit of the ceiling department. So like I was a little bit underwhelmed with that. The production was a little bit underwhelming. I think that the press man coverage stuff was definitely on the lower end of the guys I'm willing to take in the first round. It's just the off coverage stuff, the cheat motion stuff, you can see like just how much separation he's going to
Totally.
create and like the explosiveness, like the ability to take it 60 yards, win over the top. That stuff is really impressive to me. But I'm in full agreement with you. The OC is going to have to work with him to get the most out of a round one draft capital.
Question for you, and I'll give my answer first. What did you think about him after the catch with someone that has this level of speed? Because to me, I was not impressed. And especially
Mhm.
on screens, he saw way more of them at Houston. I think he had 31 of them there and caught about 20 of them. This past year, it was only 7 screen targets. So that's maybe something that one isn't in Texas offense. And
Right.
two, Sark maybe saw the Houston stuff and he wasn't thrilled about it. I think he did a poor job of reading blocks in front of him. I thought he did a poor job of winning on contact. I kind of think with these awesome yak players in college and especially in the NFL, it's almost like a special skill, a sixth
Mhm.
sense. Doesn't have to mean that you're the fastest player. You're just really good at staying an arm length away. And I just don't know that he has that. And the stats back it up. He
Yeah.
only forced 8 missed tackles in each of the last 2 seasons, and his 5.2 yards after catch per reception was a 76th in this draft class.
I think like the world class version of this profile was like Jalen Waddle, who like the yards after the catchability at Alabama was like totally ridiculous. And I agree with you. He can do it. There will be opportunities for him on cheat motions where he breaks inside and he can split the safeties and just absolutely roll. But the lack of screens and you just like the side to side movement, you just wonder exactly like how much upside you're getting from that. So I would say that that's in like a mystery box category for me. But
Right.
for somebody with that level speed, I was wanting a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, since he greatly improved his hands in one offseason, maybe he just greatly improves
Hmm.
his yak in this
Hmm.
offseason at the
Hmm.
same time. And again, Texas A&M game, I thought he did a really good job after the catch. That was one that people will want to highlight for sure. Okay, another question for you. Do you think defenses in those first 12 games of last season were terrified of his speed, where you could tell that they adjusted their defensive alignment, thinking like, we can't let this guy beat us over the top over and over and over again?
Probably not. I would say the one thing that makes him different though is he was actually playing on the line of scrimmage at X at some times, and just naturally you're going to have those type of guys have some one-on-one situations underneath, and then sometimes you're going to have the safety rolling over the top. I didn't notice like defenses like completely changing their game plan to take him away, and I do wonder if like the 5'11", 191 pound guy that you're just not going to have that. And it's not like the Tyreek Hill situation, the Jamar Chase situation, where it's like, oh my god, like look where the safeties are lining up. I'm not necessarily sure if I noticed that.
Yeah, if you didn't tell me about his athletic profile, and I think one, this is why athletic profiles are important because it kind of shows potential areas of that are untapped
Hmm.
for these players. I would have called him more of like a smooth player than a pure straight line speed player. And that's not a negative. Like you see that smoothness, I think, in his routes in terms of his changing his pacing of his gears, starts early on with a certain speed, changes it, and especially on his brakes, like it shows in his hips and everything of the sort. Like I really liked him. I really liked him in that area. I think he can play in 2 wide receiver sets in the NFL for sure, and he's just going to be to me that movement Z.
Hmm.
And to get the most out of him, you're going to have to game plan certain things with him. And for that reason, again, he is being linked by many, Todd McShay, Daniel Jeremiah. We can keep going down the list as the wide receiver one in this class. But to me, that would put him closer in like the Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison area of drafts in like the early 20s than it would be in the like, let's say, 8 to 12 draft
Right.
range. I know these are different draft classes,
Hmm.
but if he's more of like a plus wide receiver two, that's the area of the draft that I would feel much more comfortable taking this profile.
Yeah, I think the most likely scenarios he's going to be that electric number two wide receiver. I have him like a late round one, early round two grade. I don't get the top 20 hype necessarily. I think he has the ability to turn into a number one wide receiver. I think if his route running improves and his hands improve, he kind of plays a little bit similarly to like Steph Diggs, who at his best can win over the top and at his very best was electric snapping things off. I think he has a ways to get there, but I do see the athletic
He's not like a
tools.
storyteller that much, I think, as a route
I
runner.
agree. I agree. It's really just like the athleticism, but that's a style player he would be in. Another player that was drafted early, ran really fast, actually even had more college production was Will Fuller. Now that career went kind of absolutely crazy, but I think at his best was vertical ability, and then when snap things off. And even though he was really fast, he was never used in the screen game either. So those are kind of like the spectrums that I'm looking at in terms of comparison. And 91st percentile in my model. So I think a good player. I don't get the number one wide receiver in the draft class hype personally, though.
The two players I saw, again, if you go back and watch 2023 at Houston, he looked identical to Curtis Samuel in the NFL. There were a lot more shorter routes as well, but in terms of that style of a route runner, and then maybe some inconsistencies in his game too. And then the comparison that a lot of people were making at Texas is Chris Olave. And I can see that at the same time. But I think the answers lie somewhere in the middle here. And man, it's fascinating. He's such an interesting profile. The 4.29, I don't want to scoff at it at all. I can absolutely see a impactful player on an NFL roster, but man, top 15 selection. I know this is like a super binary definition, but can he be a one? I don't know if he can be a one.
Yeah, the Chris Olave stuff, he was just so smooth as a route runner
Yeah.
that I can't get Matthew Golden there, at least not yet. But 21 years old, was at Texas, lit it up when the games mattered the most. So there's a story to tell. I don't think that this story is certainly over yet. I think that he's going to develop in the NFL, and we'll see where that takes him.
All right. As you can tell, Hayden and I do not share notes with each other. That makes these conversations extra special for all of you. So if you're new around here, hit that subscribe button, leave a thumbs up, go and check out another prospect profile right after this one, including Tech McMillan that we posted earlier this week. And we'll see you on that one.